If you think of week one of the regular season as Christmas Day for NFL fans, well, schedule release day is kind of your Christmas Eve, because now we get to know who the Indianapolis Colts will face for 17 regular season games, where the bye week will fall, and some critical matchups along the way. We have a couple of primetime opportunities as well. First and foremost, though, Matt, the Colts open the season at home for the first time since 2018 as they welcome the Seattle Seahawks, back-to-back home games. And you said it, the first half of this schedule is a gauntlet. It
is. I mean, the NFL certainly issued a challenge to the Colts. Well, here we go. Challenge accepted. It is good news that the Colts open up at home, as you said, for the first time since 2018, taking on a playoff team from last year in the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks. Interestingly, that's the first time, or will be the first time, the Colts and Seahawks play at Lucas Oil Stadium since 2013. But yeah, big picture takeaways on the schedule. The first 5 games are an absolute meat grinder. It is murderer's row for the Colts. The first 5, I'm saying it's the first quarter of the season because we're playing an odd number of games now. So I'm going to go ahead and take the liberty of saying the first 5 games of the first quarter of the season, absolutely incredibly tough for the Colts. I mean, we'll get into it, but I mean, every single one of those teams last year in the first 5 games won at least 10 games. 4 of them later made the playoffs.
Those first 5 weeks include back-to-back home games against the Seahawks and Rams. Then you hit the road for 3 consecutive road games. You start your first division matchup of the season against the Titans at Nashville. Then you go down to Miami to face the Dolphins, who were nearly a playoff team last year.
Right.
And then you wrap up that first quarter of the season at Baltimore to face the Ravens on Monday night. How tough is that stretch, those first 5 games, especially when you consider that you're likely not to have guys like left tackle Eric Fisher or Dio Adangbo, your second-round pick from the draft,
right,
available, as they each are coming off Achilles injuries and likely are looking at a little bit later return
right
after those first 5 weeks of the season?
No, it's a great point. I mean, you look at Seattle, L.A., Tennessee, Miami, and Baltimore. All of those teams, as I said, won at least 10 games last year. 4 of them made the playoffs. 2 of them won their division. Those teams last year were combined 54-26. So getting off to a good start, it's imperative for every team every year. But the Colts certainly have a challenge in doing that. And as you said, it's a brutal stretch of the back end of that 5-game period, 3 consecutive on the road. So, we talk about last year. Remember the month of November in 2020? It was Tennessee twice in a matter of 3 weeks. You played Green Bay at home and Baltimore at home. We talked about, okay, that is probably the toughest stretch of that particular season. Right out of the gate, the Colts get that in 2021. The Colts went 2-2 in November of 2020. This is a really difficult schedule for the Colts. And, I haven't seen everybody's schedule as we sit here and talk right now. I don't know what everybody's toughest, stretch of the season is around the NFL, but I would be hard-pressed to find a more difficult 5-game period across the NFL than what the Colts opened up with in 2021.
And then when you look to the second quarter of the season, you host your first divisional game as you welcome in the Houston Texans. That's going to be in week 6. Then you hit the road to face San Francisco, back home against the Titans, and then that Thursday night game against the Jets. I look at that stretch and you think, hey, the NFL must have listened to DeForest Buckner and what he said last season. Let's go back. Let's run that back really quick for a reminder.
I don't know about you, but I think we deserve more primetime games. Let's go.
Matt, DeForest got his wish, apparently, because the Colts do have 4 primetime games. They'll get to host a primetime game for the first time in a very long while. And you have the potential for a 5th primetime game because we don't yet know when the Colts will host the New England Patriots. So looking at that stretch, Houston, San Fran, Tennessee, and New York, those are 2 primetime opportunities. Second quarter of the season, your evaluation.
Well, it is good news of the Colts after last season in 2020 having only the 1 mandatory primetime game. Everybody has to play on Thursday night. The Colts do get on primetime national TV 4 times this year. We don't know about that New England game later in the season. That's still TBD. I guess it's good news, bad news. You're on primetime, but again, you're on the road 3 out of 4, which is incredibly disconcerting. I have no explanation for it, why this franchise continues to get on the wrong end of primetime games. It's absolutely crazy. If you look at the home and road splits in the recent past here for the Colts, in the last 5 years, Larra, the Colts have played 14 primetime games. 12 of them have been on the road. Obviously, only 2 at home. Since 2017, it's 9 on the road, 1 at home. It's crazy. I mean, 74% since 2012, the Colts have played or will have played 31 primetime games in the regular season. 23 of those have been on the road. That's 74%. That's by far the highest percentage in the NFL in that span. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school here at all, because Jim Irsay has talked openly about this. I mean, going back to the 2019 schedule, he was upset about it. And then obviously the 19 season didn't go the way the Colts wanted in terms of a record, 7-9. When you're coming off an under 500 season in 2020, you're going to feel the repercussions of that not being on primetime. But it makes no sense this team going 11-5 last year, having a ton of franchise momentum, Carson Wentz, a lot of juicy storylines that the national audience could kind of eat up. The fact that they don't get a home game. The last time this franchise played at home in a marquee setting, if you will, Sunday night or Monday night, is 2015. That's 6 years. To me, that's unacceptable. I don't know why the NFL continues to do that to this franchise, but that has to be a big chip on this team's shoulder to prove to the NFL once again they're worthy of more primetime games and that they should get primetime games at home for this fan base. I don't understand it.
We do know one thing. This team plays really well, or at least the team that's carrying over from 2020 plays really well with a chip on their shoulder, so they likely will take this as great motivation. It's a very – oh, go ahead. Right?
No, I was just going to say, it's you talk about that stretch that you I totally veered away from your initial question, and I apologize that. But you're talking about that.
It's a lot to unpack. That's all right.
At Baltimore, Houston, at San Francisco, and Tennessee, sort of that second layer, that second quarter of the season. It's funny. It's great. Again, the Colts are on primetime, 2 games, but both of them are on the road. And that's a San Francisco game. That's a Sunday nighter. You're talking about getting home in the wee hours of the morning on Monday. You're going to land literally when the sun's coming up on the Eastern time zone. You're going to land 4, 5, 6 in the morning, whatever it is. But what stands out to me about that period is you got 2 primetime games in a span of 3 weeks. But after both of those primetime games, in a short week, if you will, less time to prepare, you have 2 really big division games. You have to play Houston and Tennessee at home. So that's something you look at the primetime games, where they land. And I know we sit here and every team has their schedule inequities, if you will, but that's something that stood out to me immediately is you have to go on the road in primetime twice in a span of 3 weeks, and then after those games, really, really important AFC South matchups.
And a very, very late bye week. You only have 1 divisional game after the bye week, which doesn't come until week 18. We'll get to that, but I wanted to build into bye week because you have a week 14 bye.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a break after running that early gauntlet that you mentioned,
right.
That really tough stretch of primetime road games that you're going to face. So it's week 14 for the bye week. And leading up to that, you play at Buffalo, you host the Buccaneers, and then you're at Houston before you get a bye week. So looking at that little chunk before you finally get some reprieve the second week of December.
Right. I mean, get ready for terms like, injury prevention, veteran day off, and load management. Because
I thought that was just the NBA, load management.
Exactly. I mean, but you're going to be playing 17 games in 18 weeks, and this is the latest bye week for the Colts that I can remember in a long, long time. I mean, if you go back to last year, the bye week was right in the middle. I think it was late October, week 7. This year, it's literally twice as long. You have to wait longer than that. You have to go 14 weeks to get a day off. And so Larry, it all adds up. You're talking about starting training camp, what is it, late July 27th, 28th, whatever it is. And I know the preseason has dwindled, going from 4 games to 3, so that helps, obviously. But you're talking about practice time. So you're talking about basically end of July to middle December without really having a true long period, extended break from football to kind of decompress, compartmentalize mentally, but just get right physically. I mean, it's going to be a huge thing for the Colts this year to stay healthy, remain durable, and just have your best players available for all these marquee games that you're going to have in the first half of the season.
That's when we get to those Wednesday injury reports where everybody needs to take a breath, because there are going to be some situations where you do have a lot of people taking those extra days off, kind of like what you saw toward the end of the 2020 season with guys like T.Y. Hilton, how they balanced his practice week schedule accordingly to give him that extra time.
Right.
So that'll be something to really keep in mind, is how they adjust for that. That's one of the reasons we heard over the course of this offseason how critical depth was going to be, and reinforcing the depth so that you are able to rotate guys through, not even just in-game scenarios, but also over the course of the week.
Your backups need to be quality. They need to be quasi-starters. I mean, that's true for every season, but now that the NFL has switched from 16 to 17 games, first time the league has increased the number of games since 1978. Yes, I mean, depth and quality of depth it's paramount now more than ever. That's why you saw the Colts, I think, with additions like Julian Davenport and Sam Tevy and Antoine Woods coming in. Like, you need your backups. There needs to be no drop off from a quality standpoint from your ones to your twos to your threes.
Looking at the final 4 games of the season, headlining that, you host the New England Patriots. That's set to be either December 18th or 19th. You go on the road to play the Arizona Cardinals. Merry Christmas. That's a primetime game on Christmas Day for the Indianapolis Colts. You'll host the Raiders, and then finishing the season, Week 18 at Jacksonville. For me, that Week 18 game is critical because we know the Colts' history playing on the road against the Jags. And that is a point where you could be vying for playoff position, as the Colts were last season, really needing a victory to put yourself in position.
Yeah, I mean, what stands out to me in the back half of the season, or the last quarter of the season, if you will, there's a chance, at least on paper, that the Colts can kind of make up some ground and build up some momentum for a potential playoff push in the month of January. I mean, from Week 9 to Week 18, the Colts only played 2 teams that had a winning record from last season. So in that stretch, you've got to play the Bills and the Buccaneers. But outside of that, you play the Jets, the Jaguars twice, the Texans, Patriots, Cardinals, and the Raiders. Those teams combined, Larra, to go 31-81 last season. But that being said, as we all know, every year, since 1990, there's been at least 4 teams that make the playoffs that didn't the year before. So, which of these teams later on in the schedule are going to be a surprise team that could be more of a difficult game for the Colts than we think sitting here and talking in May? I look at certainly New England, with all the moves they made this offseason with, a bevy of free agents. I think the Raiders, who were at 8-8 last year, they could be a better team. Certainly Jacksonville is going to be much improved with, Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer and all of those, draft picks and free agents that they've signed. They're certainly going to be a lot better. Earlier in the schedule, I look at the 49ers. They have nowhere to go but up with the new quarterback and Trey Lance, and they had so many injuries from last season. So there's always a couple of marquee games on the schedule that are going to pop up that we just don't know about right now because of, teams getting hot. And as they always say, it's not who you play, it's when you play them. And so there's always going to be, because of parity in this league, a few games that we're just not talking about right now. They're going to be really important for this team.
Are you a little surprised that hosting the reigning Super Bowl champs and the Tampa Bay Bucks wasn't one of the primetime games? Because to me, that was one of those. I thought that was an obvious opportunity to have the Colts hosting the Bucks. I almost said Patriots because, gosh darn it, I always still picture Tom Brady as a Patriot, even though he just won a ring with the Bucks. But to me, that was one of those that I thought surely that would get the national attention.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm really surprised. That's a Sunday game after Thanksgiving. It's a Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, and it's a 1 o'clock game. I mean, that game has storylines everywhere. I mean, it's juicy, obviously, with Tom Brady and, the rivalry between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and the rivalry between the Colts and the Patriots. Bruce Arians coming back. I mean, Colts fans are going to be jacked up for that game because it's Tom Brady. Enough said. I mean, he is 15-4 all time against the Colts. He has won 8 straight games against this franchise. The last time the Colts beat Tom Brady, you have to go back to 2009. So defending Super Bowl champs, a quarterback that everybody loves to hate, the former head coach that everybody loved at the time in 2012. I was surprised that was not a primetime game, but it's going to be a very, very important game for the Colts because, again, it's against a playoff team from last year. Obviously, it's the Super Bowl champion, and we all know, we've talked about it all offseason, for the Colts to take that next step, They've got to beat playoff teams. They have to beat really good competition. They were 1-4 last year against teams that played in the AFC playoffs, including the Buffalo Bills. So right out of the gate, to kind of put a bow on our conversation, right out of the gate, you play those first 5 games against teams that all won at least 10 games last year. The Colts are going to have to prove it right out of the chute in 2021, and that'll go a long way to determine how viable of a playoff team this team is in 2021.
And a couple of critical factors leading up to that is you still are looking to see exactly what the OTA and minicamp schedule are going to be, with having a new quarterback who's looking to get on the same page with his offense, and you have a number of additions also with this defense. All of these pieces that you're looking to bring into the puzzle well in advance of training camp. You certainly hope that you get some opportunities here at the facility to get guys together, aside from just the Zoom meetings that have already been going on. Looking forward to what will be certainly an exciting 2021 Indianapolis Colts season. Thanks for joining us for a very special bonus edition of our Overtime show.